Hi guys, welcome to Ask Russell episode 12. So for this one, it's going to be on like the effective training frequency, and thinking about sort of recovery and how often you really want to train. So this is from a question I got from Xian, who's talking about his doctor, so he doesn't get into train as frequently or consistency as he'd like, and it affects his sort of improvement and performance. So what I wanted to do is, I thought this would have to be a board session, because I like drawing the odd chart here and there. So what we've got here is sort of performance on the vertical axis. It's kind of arbitrary performance, really. You know, I've simplified it into one thing, but it represents, you know, like training gains in speed, strength, power, size, fitness, whatever. And then time on the horizontal. So think of it kind of in days as we go through. So the dotted line is sort of you at base level. Your performance is here, not very high up, and you're bimbling along, not doing very much with your life or training at this point. And then you decide, right, I want to train. So you do a training session, and what happens is actually the acute effective training, i.e. like what happens straight after a session, is that you actually get worse because you've caused a stress on your body. So you're obviously fatigued. We all know what like DOMS and muscle soreness feels like. You maybe, let's say you can't jump as high, you can't run as fast because you're still knackered. So it looks a bit like this. So you see it drops off. And then over the course of a few days, you start to recover. So you recover back up to where you were, and then your body super compensates. So it says, that was really hard, I want to be better at that next time I do it, so I'll sort of overkill on the recovery, so you get a bit better. So over the course of a few days, you've gone from your baseline level to sort of step one. You've moved up, you're now better than you were. Okay, and then at some point, hopefully there, you know, you train again, and then you cause that little you cause a little fatigue effect, and then you cause the recovery effect, and then you supercompensate again. So you kind of go through this cycle like that, training and recovering and supercompensating, and you go bump, 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 and you work up the scale, and you get better, hopefully, okay? So now this kind of time scale, it might be kind of 1 to 2 days to kind of your worst state, and then obviously it varies per individual, but then you recover through, and maybe at kind of 2 to 3 to 4, you kind of at here, and then it goes on like that. So at this point, hopefully you've got it right, and you've trained as frequently as you need to. But if you don't train somewhere in this kind of region, then you're starting to, you either quit and just bimble along back at normal again, or you train again somewhere around here. So it sends you back down again, and you kind of recover here again, and you don't really make any progress. You sort of just bimble along. So if you get your frequency is too low, then you're in trouble. So what that basically means is training less than once a week means you're not going to make very much progress. It's going to be very slow or no progress. You need to train more often than that. The optimal, that from the science and from my experience, seems to be realistically train the lower body twice a week, because they're really big muscles, so you can cause a lot of fatigue, a lot of stress, so they take a bit longer to recover, so twice a week. And then the upper body, smaller muscles, tend to be able to be trained 3 times a week. So that's where, it'll vary per individual, but you get a good kind of optimal balance so that, you know, the average of your performance over time is improving. So you make a nice big performance increase. But if you train too frequently, then what happens is, let's say you trained here, sorry if it's getting a bit cluttered, hopefully we can still see it, you actually end up sending yourself down and down and down and down, so you kind of spiral out. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker forever, unless you're really doing it wrong. But what you just find that you just don't feel up for sessions, you feel sore when you start, you maybe start to pick up some niggles and some injuries and that kind of thing. So you want to be aware that this is not right, and the way to solve that problem is not to do more, it's to do less. Sort of back out of it a little bit and think about what you're doing, and start to make just sensible gains. So hopefully that's sort of answered the question for you, Xian, and everyone else. As always, any questions, russell@conditioningcentre.com, and for any details, check the website at www.conditioningcentre.com. Cheers.